Welcome to Shaped by Faith. I'm Theresa Rowe, where we shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. I have a very special guest on today. Most people know him, Keith Lawrence. He's worked at the Owensboro Messenger-Inquirer since 1972. He has a wealth of information. He's a reporter and he writes columns. Thanks, Keith, for coming on Shaped by Faith.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, I'm really interested in what got you interested in pursuing a career in journalism.
Basically, I can't do anything else, but when I was a sophomore in high school, 1963, our English teacher, Christine Travis, had us write poems, and I don't know what I wrote. I didn't keep it, but she liked it enough. She went across the hall to the journalism class and asked them to print it in the newspaper, the Ballard Beacon, Ballard Memorial High School.
Uh-huh.
And they did, and they suggested I take journalism in the fall, and I did. And I've been doing it ever since.
Wow. So you actually had someone that took note and kind of directed you on your path. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's a blessing in itself. You know, a lot of people don't have that in their life. So obviously, God was watching over you. So tell me when you started working on newspapers and how old were you?
I started with the high school newspaper that fall. One of the first stories I wrote was the obituary for the teacher who told me to do that. She stayed up late with a friend who was sick and died in a car wreck on our way home.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Was that hard to do for you? I mean, to write that?
Can't remember that far back.
That's interesting. Okay, so what were your dreams and aspirations about, like, going into journalism as a career? Like, when did you decide to do that? And, like, what were your visions of how things were going to go?
Well, I think when I was a sophomore, I wanted to be an Air Force pilot, but I couldn't do math. I got bad eyes, and there was a war going on, so I decided that wasn't a good idea. And but I went to Murray State University after that. Well, it was actually Murray State College at the time, and studied journalism. And so by then I knew that's what I wanted to do. We stayed and got our master's degrees in communications. My wife and I both worked we met on the high school newspaper, and we continued to work on the college paper. And then I got drafted in 1970, I'm sorry, and spent 2 years working for the Army hometown news releases and working for the Armored Sentinel at Fort Hood, Texas. Got out of there, and then we started working in Tennessee for starting 2 weekly newspapers for people who were interested in getting Richard Nixon reelected.
Really?
And that didn't last till the election. They didn't know what they were doing. The paper lasted about 3 months, and I've been here ever since.
Okay, so, I mean, what led you to Owensboro, Kentucky, to the Messenger-Inquirer?
It was an open job.
Okay, well, that's good. So, I mean, as far as your interview, I know that was a long time ago, but do you remember anything about your interview process? Did they call you in, talk to you, ask about your experience, or what?
Yeah, we came up, we were in Waverly, Tennessee at the time. Of course, that was gone. We were living with my parents in the interim, and came up for an interview with John and Larry Hager. And they put us up in the Gabe's Tower.
Oh, wow.
Overnight, before the interview, I guess. And took us down to eat at the Campbell Club. And interview didn't last terribly long. I don't remember any of the questions, really.
Right, but obviously they liked you. Now, you told me that they wouldn't hire married couples, right?
No, they had a nepotism thing that couldn't be related to, closely related to anyone, unless your name was Hager. And but the funny part of it was you could be living with someone and not married, but still work there.
Really? Wow. Yeah. Okay. So your wife, did she give up her career so you could work?
Yeah, she got a job that spring teaching journalism at Owensboro High School. She found out she was pregnant, and they fired her for being pregnant.
No way. Oh, goodness.
But are they at least rescinded their offer?
Uh-huh. Boy,
that was back in the day when you could do stuff like that.
That's right. Times have changed a lot.
Yeah.
Well, as a reporter, I mean, you've seen a lot go on in Owensboro. You've seen the transition. You've seen the exciting times as well. So why don't you tell us, so you started working at the newspaper in 72. Why don't you tell us about what was happening in the 70s and maybe some of the stories you reported on?
Well, late 70s, we got Town Square Mall and the Executive Inn, both built in, and things were really, future was really looking good. The 80s, things started going the other way. Mm-hmm. We actually lost population in the 80s. Green River Steel closed, and when the mall opened downtown, kind of died, and grass was growing in the sidewalks down there for a while. Wow. And then things got better in the 90s. River Park Center opened, and downtown parking garage, and the Judicial Center, mm-hmm. and all that was coming on. So the downtown started coming back in the 90s.
Keith, I remember, I guess it had to have been in the 70s when stars would actually fly into the airport. I remember my father was a control tower. He was a chief at the control tower out there. And I remember as a little girl, I remember Phyllis Diller and Bob Hope and different stars like that. Did you ever get to interview or write about any of the stars that visited our area?
I did telephone interviews with a lot of them. Dolly Parton, I remember most of them had somebody call up and say, hold for whoever. Uh-huh. And Dolly Parton called up herself. She didn't bother with the with the middle person. I thought, man, somebody that big, and they don't have to have somebody make their phone calls for them. Yeah,
I've heard she is very nice in person, and what you see is what you get. I've heard that from different people. How many articles have you written through the years?
More than 25,000.
Wow. Okay. 25,000. So obviously you love to write. You have to love to write to do what you're doing. Yeah. So what inspires you? Where does your creativity come from? Because obviously you have it.
It's one of those things that's just part of me. Don't know where it comes from. Well, I could say from God, but that always sounds a little self-serving to say, oh, God single me out. So.
Well, I think it is definitely a gift. I think He gives us all in different ways. So I definitely, believe for sure that He has gifted you in that way. You've seen a lot of changes at the newspaper. What's one of the biggest changes you've seen since starting there in 72 and now?
Probably the biggest change is the fact that back in the 70s, 80s, more than 90% of the people in the county took the newspaper. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the figure is now. It's a lot less than that. And once a month, we throw out a free newspaper in everybody's yard in Davis County, or we're supposed to. And I walk in my neighborhood, and there's probably 15 at least newspapers laying in the yard. People don't even want them enough to walk out and pick them up for free. So, and there's so many people who say they get their news from Facebook, which is a terrible place to get news from. Because
I agree.
Yeah.
Or Twitter.
I think that's probably the biggest change.
Yeah. So the newspaper went online. I don't know what year that was, but it seems like a lot of things went online. Life has changed, definitely, even in the last 10 years, the way we do things. So we're gonna take a break, Keith, and so when we come back, we want to hear more from you. Okay. So everyone, stay tuned for more Shaped by Faith coming up next. Welcome back to Shaped by Faith, where we shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. Keith, you really are a legend in Owensboro, Kentucky, and I'm not just saying that. I'm not flattering you, but Keith Lawrence is on the line. He's worked at the Owensboro Messenger-Inquirer since 1972. He's a reporter, and he writes columns. And Keith, you write a lot about, or I should say you include a lot about the history of Owensboro, many of your news stories and your features. So what got you interested in doing that?
Gosh, I can't remember when I first started being interested in history, but I had a minor in history in college, a major in journalism, a minor in history, and, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. It's a double major. I had a major in journalism and history. And I remember I had a job interview with somebody from the Louisville Times while I was still in college, and he asked about something like that, and he said, how in the world could you do anything in journalism with a history major? And, of course, now the Louisville Times is history. They went out of business 30 years ago. And, but I enjoy, I think people, as they get older, like to know about where things came from and how the town used to be and things like that. I know I do. I always did.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember downtown, when we used to have, I'm pretty sure we used to have a Ben Franklin. And what else at Anderson's? I remember that down there. And just that's where we went. That was a big deal when I was a little girl growing up in the 70s. But I love history now. I was never good at history because it was so hard for me to remember all those dates and what happened and what war and all that. But now I'm very interested in history with anything, whatever it is. I want to know the history behind someone or why they're writing what they're writing. When did you start inventing some of the characters you've written about through the years?
Access, True Blue American Cafe and Barbershop. During the 1988 presidential election, I covered both the Democratic and Republican conventions that year, and they were in Atlanta with the Democrats, and I read somewhere that Atlanta was the Bubba capital of the world. And I started using Bubba in column, and then it just gradually grew into a barbershop with about 4 main characters. You can say things that way without really saying them yourself.
Correct.
You can go back and forth. Have one of them be really conservative, one of them be more liberal. And Albino Alice, by the way, is an African American who is whiter than the rednecks in the barbershop. So that's where that name came from. They told me, quit saying that.
Wow.
So I dropped the explanation after the first time.
Well, and you base some of your characters on events or actual places, don't you?
Blue Ruin was a little crossroads place out in western Davis County back in the 19th century. I took that name. There's still a road out there, I think, Blue Ruin Road. It's a little gravel. It may even be a dirt road, I don't know. David Boswell, former state senator, owns property on Blue Ruin Road out there.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty neat. Okay, so I want to ask what kind of feedback you've received about your characters and your stories, because I'm sure there's been people that are like, what is he talking about, or is this true? What kind of feedback have you received?
Some people like it, some people don't. I haven't received much negative feedback.
I was going to say, as a reporter and a writer, I'm sure you do receive a lot of positive feedback, but it's in those negative things. Do those get to you at all or not, or how do you just let them kind of roll off you?
I think people have gotten used to me through the years, and I used to get a lot of hate mail and phone calls and stuff. I hardly get any anymore. So I guess people that don't like it, quit reading it.
That's true. They don't have to read it.
Don't bother me anymore. But
Do you have a favorite story you want to share? Anything? Do you have a favorite story you've written or a feature you've written that you really enjoy doing?
I really enjoy most of them. I think I got the cover of the inauguration of Bill Clinton in '93, and Wendell Ford was in charge of it, so we were covering it through him. And standing up on the platform the day before while they were doing their rehearsal, most of the people had stand-ins. There was somebody with a sign around their neck that they were Bill Clinton. Somebody, Billy Graham was doing it himself, and I found myself standing beside him, and he was kind of a boyhood hero. And I was too shy to say anything to him, but my gosh, I'm standing beside Billy Graham.
Oh wow, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Will Graham, his grandson, came here, I think it was April 2015. I helped work on that, and I'm telling you what, everyone that I personally met that worked for them, because they had someone physically live here almost for a year, 2 people, to really get to know our community, and they are the real deal. They are definitely the real deal. Well, as a reporter, and you just mentioned Billy Graham. You've met a lot of amazing people through the years. So besides Billy Graham, who stands out as one of the most interesting people you've met and maybe interviewed, and why?
Most of the interviews we do are by telephone. So Martine Tompkins lived out at Curdsville. She lived to be like 105. She was the first woman in Davis County to drive a car. I mean, she did it in 19 and whatever.
Wow.
She was probably the most interesting person I've ever interviewed. She was like 95, and she was driving herself to and from Florida, and she got stopped in Georgia by a state trooper, and she started crying, so I got to get home to my baby. Her baby was the actor Tom Ewell, who was in his 70s at the time.
Wow. Wow.
She defied all age and everything else. I mean, she was...
Yeah. She must have been a happy person.
Yeah, she seemed to be.
I was going to ask you, of course, I know you have to like your job. You have to love your job to do what you do. But if you could pick a few things out, what do you like best about it?
Finding out things before anybody else does.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's, I was going to say, most days there are surprises. Some certain meetings happen certain days, that's going to be going on, but there's usually something comes along that, last week, some local investors bought the old Macy's store out there, and that was exciting. And
that is pretty neat. What is that going to be, a sports complex, or what is that going to be?
They say an indoor sports place.
Mm-hmm.
Have basketball, archery, cheer, whatever, indoor sports in there.
Well, that's good. Well, I was going to ask you, do you know anything about the senior community center, if they're going to break ground or actually have a place to go?
I don't know. They've been talking about that, man, how many years now?
I know. Well, they need a place, don't they? I mean, seniors need to stay active. I was hoping part of the mall would be for them as well, but who knows? Yeah. So as a writer, Keith, as far you report, so you're interviewing people, then you just start typing, or how do you develop your story?
I just start typing.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it. So that's why it's a gift. We're going to take another break. We've got one more break, okay? And we're going to come back and hear a little bit more from Keith Lawrence, so everyone stay tuned for more Shaped by Faith. Welcome back to Shaped by Faith, where we shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. Keith, I've so enjoyed getting to chat with you over the phone. You've been at the Messenger since 1972. You're a reporter. You write columns. You know the history of Owensboro probably better than most people around. And you have really impacted by your writing so many people. I mean, because we enjoy your columns, we enjoy what you do. I was going to ask about you personally, Keith. Are you more extroverted, introverted, or how would you describe yourself?
No, very introverted. People didn't think I'd be able to do this because I'm so shy. I'd walk up to somebody and start talking to them or something. But as long as I've got a notebook in my hand, I can do it. It's a prop, I guess. But I'm still get back in the corners when I can.
So as far as social outings, you'd rather not go? Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
somebody once told me I'd be a hermit if I didn't have to work.
Well, I bet you'd enjoy yourself, though. You know, it's.
Yeah.
I think, you know, people that are more, like you would describe it, shy or more introverted, I think they're fine with themselves also, and they can be content when there's not a lot of people around them. I think a lot of creative people like yourself, Keith, are more like that than we even know. And, you know, people need to understand that when they meet someone that writes for the newspaper, or maybe you meet a celebrity, they may not be, you know, like jump out there, Mr. Bubbly, but you have to realize that they can be very shy. You know, we need to all take that into consideration and not judge one another, I guess. Is it true that you've not taken a sick day at work?
No, I haven't had a sick day at work, and I came here basically from the Army, and they didn't give sick days, so it's been over 50 years since I've had a sick day.
How do you keep yourself healthy?
I have been sick.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But
not sick enough to work.
All right, so obviously you're a very healthy individual. Do you exercise?
Yeah. That's the only thing I do is walk. I walk about a mile a day in my neighborhood.
Walking is one of the best things. I have a good immune system. Yes, you must. You must have really good genes.
Well, my father died of congestive heart failure. My mother died of Parkinson's. So
wow.
I guess I inherited the good genes from each of them, and not the bad genes.
Right, or someone you know, way back in your line of family line. Okay, so with a minute to go, I want to ask, what advice would you give to young people who might be interested in journalism or newspaper work as a career?
I guess I would say study what's happening in the business these days and decide if you think it's a good idea. The newspapers that I've worked on through the years may not be existing in the future. I don't know. I mean, everything seems to be changing these days. I hope they are. I hope everything survives and people could have a good career working for newspapers, but I'd be afraid to advise somebody to. I'd say check it out for yourself and study the industry before you make a decision to go into it. Okay.
Keith, I want to say thank you so much for being my guest on Shaped by Faith. You're so interesting. You're enjoyable to talk to, and thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening. I'm Theresa Rowe. Everyone have a blessed day. Bye.